We're looking at moving from the process of the 10th gate, behavior of the self, the transformation of behavior. Remember that 11 or 12 days takes a long time for that to unfold. Then we went to last week, stage 2, the difficulty at the beginning, gate of ordering, this very, very powerful force. We know it's in the sacral center, and it brings us to stage 3, which is gate 2, the receptive, the gate of the direction of the self. So in this entire mandala wheel in the body graph 2, there is nothing like gate 2. As long as Ra was involved in teaching human design, he says he's never been very far away from the second gate because it holds the great mystery of the deepest mystery and the only mystery in the vast puzzle. He calls it a linchpin, as in the puzzle of what we call existence. This is the key, the direction of the self. And death is a place. See, it's a place. So where the magnetic monopole sits, you can see that it's pulling the design crystal in the ajna center, the personality crystal in the head center outside the body, still in aura, but outside the physical vehicle. When you think about it, you have this monopole that sits there that's pulling in the sternum. So the significance of the second gate is tremendous in that it's the one that's creating the illusion, literally holding the personality and the design together, the two calculations on either side, and it's giving us our concretized experience of movement in life. Time is experienced in the body. When you're decarnate or out of body, there is no time. So it's part of the time frequency. When we look at larger auric frequency fields, combinations of people, the largest of what a transpersonal auric entity is, it's called Wa. And the bedrock of what it is to be successful as a species is to have successful Wa mechanics. Wa's being at their smallest level, the OC16, 10 to 16 people. And then we have the ideal large group, which is 81, a gene pool, in order for our species to reproduce successfully. So the key to the way that the larger aura operates, the OC16, these are the 16 channels, not channels, sorry, say that again. These are the channels, there are 6, that control the mechanisms for the group of 10 to 16 people. So the 2 is the key for us individually, even in the small group, as well as the large group. It holds everything together, this illusion of separation. It is the key in the aura of the Penta because it's the central focus of what our illusion is, this Maya, the byproduct of the work of the magnetic monopole that holds us in a direction. When you get to 3 to 5 people in group, it's a unidirectional energetic flow. Same thing is happening when you're looking in a Wa, it's a unidirectional flow. When you're in an individual, it is that the energy flows back and forth inside of you and also between you and another too. But when we have these larger transauric entities, of course, the foundational building block being the Penta, this is where the energy flows in one direction and the expression in the larger group dynamic, one voice for the entirety of that body graph mechanically. So everything as we can imagine in the Maya, this magnetic monopole, at the totality of any level that we can imagine, is the byproduct of this sacred geometry. It is direction. It holds us to our frequency field. And so the magnetic monopole, in relational context to the crystals of consciousness, again, remember, the design crystal and the monopole fit together like a hand in glove. If you've ever watched the, gosh darn it, those tiny little cute creatures, Jim Henson, the dark crystal, there we go, the dark crystal, I kind of imagine it like that. When the monopole sits inside of this, they exit together. So it's a directional theme for death. We turn, well, we, not we, the I. It seems to be that we are abandoned, the personality. And so the personality crystal, in essence, think about all kinds of sacred trinaries that there are. You know, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, the body, mind, spirit, all of these mystical combinations, the triangle itself of the body graph, the original context. It's rooted in this duality that is held together through a quantum. And that quantum is, again, the advent of the magnetic monopole that holds us together in this. Oops, I accidentally clicked too fast. It is the magnetic monopole that holds us together in this illusion of separation, that quantum of the two. So anytime you have quantum, just like a gate plus a gate equals a channel that is more than just the sum of the two parts, the same thing is happening here, where the whole that is greater than the sum of the parts of the personality and the design crystal phenomena, everything has to be brought together into this physicality. The agency that brings it together is this mysterious, magnetic, magical monopole. So if we think about the body graph for a moment, the only thing that's actually inside of the body graph physically, you can see it. And it's actually been this way since conception. And of course, even after birth. This is the design crystal in the ashna. The personality crystal is not in the vehicle, it's in the auric frequency field. And in this illusion of separateness, us being separate from the totality, because currently it seems to be that we are embodied. So it's actually an illusion. We're in the vehicle's auric frequency field. So the role of the magnetic monopole is to hold the personality crystal to its union with the design. It holds us together in a geometry, our place in space. And it's pulling us along our path and trajectory in space. It's not a choice. The more that the personality screams and rails against its fate and what it seems to be experiencing and where it seems to be going, the more disconnect you will have. You can call it dysregulation, you can call it psychological splits, whatever you want to call it, the more difficulty the personality has with the body and its vehicular trajectory, the more uncomfortable that personality is going to be. So you can think about it in such a way as resistance. Ra uses this term resistance. Resistance being appropriately named towards and to each of the types of human beings accordingly with the frequency field that it gives off when it is out of integrity, out of alignment. So if we can pause for a moment and remember that this is not a choice, we can't just say, wow, I'm so frustrated. I think I'm going to be satisfied for a while. If you are able to do that, maybe fooling yourself, we'll see. But when it comes to the alignment to what's true, if you can experiment with, instead of the passenger trying to control and run the show, can we allow for the higher self in its alignment? Because everybody has a higher self. It's just it's inconsistently functioning, or let's say reflective of the place that it's in. People and places too. People are part of places. And it's sensitive to the place that it be. So just aligning one's frequency to, in the beginning of my human design experiment, my husband called it following the body. I quite like that. Always finding the truth within the body and allowing the mind to just rest and observe and watch, let go and enjoy the show. It is liberating the passenger from thinking it's in charge, that choicelessness that is our grace, that really makes a difference at the end of the day. So this monopole holds the personality to the form. This monopole doesn't hold the design crystal to the personality. It's holding the personality to the form. Remember, embodiment, gate 46. So the form is a combination of design and of the monopole. And that personality being held to this particular vehicular experience, if you try to extrapolate that outwards into an understanding of the limitations of human psychology, you'll see right away why our minds are handicapped. And if you study, not primary health system, rave psychology, I almost went down the muggle path, and very kind Lisita at Human Design America offered to give me a very low payment in order to afford my very first class, Living Your Design. Because I started the class and then I realized I couldn't do it. And I called her, and she wanted me to call her. So I called her, and I was struggling with go back to regular school or follow this human design invitation. And she helped me afford it because I was incredibly, like, I'm talking food stamps poor at the time. So the personality being helplessly, choicelessly drawn in the direction that the body is going. When you study rave psychology, okay, which is very different, regular psychology, not self, study. But rave psychology gives you the awareness of why the personality crystal goes through such an ordeal in its process, the I, who we think we are, and why mind can be such a torment, and that the authority of mind is absolute folly. When you get the big picture view of not only primary health system, but especially rave psychology too, of what happens when you use your mind to decide. You're lost and you have no idea. You cannot solve the problem from the place in which it was created. The majority of the human beings use their minds to make decisions, and you can't use your mind to get out of that trap. You can't. It has to come through some kind of recognition, awareness, response to experimenting with the body in order to find out what is most valid, real, honest, true. This personality is not a willful passenger. According to Ra, this consciousness, consciousness, currently experiencing the embodiment of being in form, the illusion. The personality does not come into the form because it wants to. So when you're thinking about a personality crystal itself, before it's brought into the vehicle, there's absolutely nothing going on out there. There's nothing. There's no embodiment. There's no feeling. It's like you carrying around a favorite piece of software in your back pocket or your backpack. Your software is in that backpack. What's it doing? Is it running? No, it's not in a computer. And this, the embodiment, this is the vehicle, this is the computer. Personality is a software. So until you put that software into hardware, in other words, for the personality, until the personality is brought into the relational dynamic with the body, where the monopole is holding the personality together to this vehicular structure, nothing happens. So suddenly, when this particular body is built enough for the personality to come into the auric frequency field, the personality is literally dragged kicking and screaming, not into the vehicle itself because it doesn't have the full embodiment. It's actually in the auric bubble. And then it's caught up with operating through the vehicle's hardware. It takes some time to be identified with only the body. And so the conditioning begins actually from inside the mother's womb. Our bodies are always ready to die because it gets that unity, the unconditional love. Okay? The love unconditionally in order to separate and build the body, the design crystal and the monopole separate in order to build the body. That's the love you're longing for, you're yearning for. That little tiny separation from self you sense inside, especially if you are undefined in the identity in the G. Your G center is white, not yellow. You may be very sensitive to feeling that split. I'm lost. I don't know where I am. Where's home? I want to go home. Do you remember that cry as a kid? I can remember, even with an unconsciously defined G. I don't belong here. Why am I here? So the personality crystal held inside of the aura by the magnetic monopole, again, 15 billion years, this experience of the personality crystal. Now, that's not just you, me, humans. It's everything. Every personality crystal. There is no difference between a human personality crystal and the personality crystal of your cat or your dog. They simply have a different vehicular construct. So the only way that a personality crystal gets to experience its full potential, other than Bardo, Bardo really is one of the exalted experiences that the personality gets to look forward to, is that your personality crystal gets to experience the potential of the limitation of this vehicle, as in the neurological potential. If you've got a brain damaged vehicle, oh boy, you get to experience that brain damage. Anybody who's ever had any kind of brain damage whatsoever, you know what I mean. The limitation of the vehicle in terms of its lifespan is another thing. Ra reminds all of us to be very careful with serotonin. And I had this sudden hit this morning right before class, so I didn't get a chance to really look at it, but I want to come back to it. I recently, my husband got us into high dose melatonin for sleep. And yeah, I looked it up and it does affect, but I'm not sure how, melatonin. I think it's synthesized from serotonin, so in the body anyway. So I do not know how it affects the serotonin levels of the body, but I don't want to fuck with that, my serotonin levels, because Ra really strongly warns against anything that will mess with your serotonin levels because it's part of the ability for you to have the lifespan that you were designed to. So the only way that a personality, again, gets to experience its full potential is its Bardo, and whatever the limitation of this vehicle is in terms of your neurology, in terms of your lifespan, in terms of the form, based on the beginning, being born, the middle, life, whatever, however long that be, and then death. So our form, again, always ready to die. Death is a place. Personality is not willful. And in order to go in a unique, different direction for our life process, we have this experience, if we're lucky, of being our own authority. And then when it's time to die, the monopole takes a different direction. The monopole is actually sitting on a gateway to death, because this is one of the portals of death, as in changing direction towards death. When you think about the relationship of our magnetic monopole to the design crystal, because the monopole is pointed upwards, pulling, right? It's a singularly pulling magnet. It's a monopole, one direction, unidirectionally magnetic. So if it's pointed upwards, it's pulling to hold the design crystal in place. So kind of like the way that conception mechanics work, rather than pointing upwards into the opening of the life program, throughout your life, you carry this magnetic monopole that's sitting on a gateway to the death, which is a straight line pointed down outside of the vehicle, outside of the body. So the personality sitting on top, and we can see that the receptive, the femininity, the form principle, the gate of the direction of the self is this gate to yinist of all gates. See all the yin lines, the essence of the extreme of the form principle to the extreme of the physical principle. This is the embodiment of form. in Taurus is where it is in the Western astrological wheel. Deep potential for form principle. Okay, form principle. The personality that runs around wildly, I chose this life, I chose my family. No, you didn't, actually. The body, the vehicle, called you. It chose you to witness its one precious life. Now, isn't that sweet? I like that. I quite like that. It shows the wonderful awe and wonder that you could have in relational dynamic to this body, the rented vehicle, the borrowed vehicle, the witnessed vehicle. It's not even yours, I would say. It's rented, it's borrowed, but it wants you there until it's done with you. So now let's talk about stage 3, the second gate, this direction for everything, where we're dealing with, again, look, individuality, yes? Part of knowing, this one over here was centering, an aspect of integration as well. So then we're looking at the potential for natural mutation. Okay, natural mutation. If we think for a moment about our lives, how is it that humanity has managed to stay alive? Well, to keep up with what's going on in the world, we have mutation and we carry on our genes to our children and they go forth and multiply too, potentially. And then there's just this wheel of incarnation, decarnation, yeah, the cycles of life. So this deep mutation, and you can say artistic possibility because all of individuality has an artistic quality to it. The word natural in this context is that dying, if we talk about where the quarter of mutation tries to teach us that dying is one of the most natural phenomena that we have, quarter of mutation, purpose fulfilled through transformation, the biggest transformation of all, death. It begins with Hades, it ends with deep, 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 deep transformation. Pluto currently transforming all of us deeply because it's in gate 60. So the dying, as far as being a natural phenomena, this vehicle was born to die. Oh, that's a great book. My mind loves picking book titles. Born to Die. Oh, how dramatic. Kind of cool. Okay, so when you see this context of the way that the vehicle goes through its cycles, there's this wheel, this ice moon. Well, the wheel is turning and the moon is going through. We're always dying. And the second line says, that's genius. We think about a second line, the hermit line, if it were in gate 2, but because of genetic continuity, all 2s are genius. That's why they're that natural. They're hearing a call. When we think about 2s, we always think about them waiting for the call, being so picky, so selective. So hearing the call of death, that's really what it's all about here. So if we think about the word for a moment and the reason why we are so specifically picky, choosy, precise with our language in human design is because everything in life is frequency. So frequency is the capacity to be able to release signals, information, data, the sound, word, vibrational formulas you hear that I speak, and the combinations to which we experiment with in order, and the tonality and the cadence in order to transmit something of value to you, to reach across the virtual airwaves, to find the resonance with you. So again, the conception process was personality crystal gets dragged in, but it's called. And it's called by frequency. The monopole, remember in gate 2, sets up that frequency. That frequency calls the personality crystal into this vehicular process, this body, this one precious life, perfectly married to the form. No matter what disgruntledness you might have with your lovely, wonderful, precious, beloved body, it is your ride this life, but it called you. It chose you. Here in the second gate, in the second line, the call from the magnetic monopole, it's the call that says, hey, guess what? We're going to get out of the box. It's the call. It's a signal. Out of the box? Why, what could that mean? Remember, we're talking about death. The 2.2 coordinates the door, the magnetic monopole alignment. So the only way that the life process can truly come to an end, it cannot come from the second gate because it is the G center. It actually, the door gets slammed shut or closed gently, whatever it happens to be, by the 29 and the 14. See, the finishing of a process. But the place of no return is actually that 29. These sacral gates, remember how powerful they are? The essence of the life force, the mechanisms to turn off the life force are here in 29 and 14. But it's unlike anything else in the body graph. Oh, of course, everything is utterly unique. But think about what 29 is, the keynotes that we associate with 29. Not just saying yes or no, a dedication, commitment, the abysmal, the persistence. If it says yes, but what happens when it says no? Like anything else in a process, every single stage that the moon enters into is going to bring an important attribute. Transformations that are chemical, alchemical, happening in the body, therefore affecting the personality. Yes? That personality transformation that's preparing you. It's building those keys along the way, a call from the magnetic monopole that the body, look, responds to. Yes, I'm committed to life, or yes, I'm committed to death. If you say, oh, no, 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 I don't want to die yet. Oh, you're in fear mode. That's kind of a dangerous place to be. Yes to life, or yes to death. Magnetic monopoles give us a life and it takes it away. If you go back to the logic of this, remember that the monopole is holding us together in the illusion of our separateness, moving us along our path, our line of geometry, like the arm of a cable car. It's drawing us, pulling us. And at the deep mystical level, we're seeing the enormous importance of what the monopole does to us, or what it does for us in our lives, as in our perception of this life. The monopole governs when it begins, calls us into the body. And it's the monopole in the second gate that releases the signal that points downward. The downward pointing does something. It coordinates the door. Remember that door out here? Out of the body. So when you see that the second gate has been reached in that lunar cycle, the monopole signals, what is it doing? It's preparing the opening for the door, that door that's exactly opposite of the 60 gate, the 60th gate. Oh, but there's no hexagram down here. No, it's just a door. It's priming the door to open. It's coordinating the door to open. That's what stage 3, gate 2, line 2, genius coordinates the door. In this place where the door is, this instrument that we are, the orchestra of the string of notes that runs out and, oh, time to go. That's my cue. You get to that place and you leave. Well, not you really, but this ajna, body, consciousness, going into, you reunite with the two because it turned and it's leaving. The monopole setting the coordinates for the door. So when we talk about that door, it's fascinating the recognition that the monopole has in setting the coordinates. It's not waiting for the coordinates. It's not recognizing that there's a place down the road of when it's going to happen. It's not actually doing that. It's like somebody sitting inside of the airplane and the pilot's changing the coordinates for a landing. You know, they're changing let's say they're on autopilot. Okay, calculating. We're going in a different direction now because we've got to land now. So that's what it's doing, the monopole. Ross says it's not so odd when you think about it. How many people get moved in a different direction? So let's say your daily, oh, I'm multiple gate fives. I have a very fixed pattern. But anytime you have degradation of the body, your patterns change, don't they? Can you remember not having enough energy to get out of bed? Have you ever felt like you were on your deathbed? Literally, your body changed direction. It didn't go anywhere in that case, you know, if you couldn't get out of bed. Or maybe you got pulled into a hospital or driven to the hospital. Maybe you're in a sick bed. Maybe you're in hospice. Whatever it happens to be, your geometry changed, didn't it? So, as in your direction. So, when somebody has, let's say you are terminally ill, they've given you a diagnosis, you're on your deathbed, you know, you have 3 months to live, but then somehow you bounce back. But they're like, oh, but you've still got cancer. And you keep going through all these treatments, these lingering diseases where at any moment you could die, you know, those coordinates coming. When is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? Everybody's always talking about how much time do you have? Oh, they gave me 3 months. Oh, they gave me 6 months. Oh, I got a year, you know? And if you believe their story, how disempowering is that? Oh, I've only got 3 months to live. Do you immediately give up because that person, that outer authority told you that you only had 3 months to live? Or do you have the rise inside to fight for a purposeful life, even if it may seem to be that it's only 3 months away? Now, what's really controlling whether or not we live or die, it's the sacral. It's not you, your personality, you know? It's the body. It's the sacral. That's what's so special about the next couple of stages. Well, the next one especially, you know? When we look at the microcosm of life and death, when we are awake, we'll say, or asleep as a metaphor, the people oftentimes would say, oh, you know, to little children, that mommy's sleeping if they didn't know how to deal with the death of the child's mother. The long sleep, they might call it. Yeah, the eternal sleep, don't they? So think about that metaphor in relationship to a generator, okay? When we talk about generators, now I'm talking pure generator, exhaustion as far as the engine coming to the end of its life is the theme of the generator. Because the generator is here to generate life. It creates life, doesn't it? It is the life force. It is the life force. All the rest of us, those who are non-sacral, we're living on borrowed energy. Quite interesting how Ra describes it. It's as if the undefined sacrals are cut off from life. Just, the plug got pulled. Whereas the generator, it stopped generating life. So when the engine truly comes to an end, as in it is no longer committing its resources to recreate, as in it closes its eyes, pure generator, can't keep the eyes open, that's when it's ready to leave the plane. Just like if you've ever had a pure sacral generator child and they had to, you know, run down their energy in order to get to sleep. I even saw it with my manifesting generator, where she had to run around in order to burn off her energy so that she could get her reading in bed and wind down. Pure generators, they are not designed to be forced into a bedtime. They need to be able to use up that energy. And then when it conks out, you could say, that's when it's really going to regenerate. But at the end of the life, when it's time for them to say bye, sayonara, see ya, never later, because it's the end, the illusion of sleep, or we're leaving this plane in terms of death, it's all about the sacral deciding. It's not anything else. So the sacral beings, Death turns off the motor. Death just turns off the reproductivity or regenerative capacity. Whereas non-sacral beings, death is not being able to tap into the life force. So our bodies cannot tap into those beings that are around us or the energy gleaned from our life cycles, life experience, transits, what have you. He wanted us to understand that there is a vast difference between sacral beings and non-sacral beings. This includes manifestors, projectors, and reflectors. So what it means, this death turning off the motors, it's natural. And then death for the non-sacral being, when we get cut off from the life force as far as from within ourselves, the ability to tap in is now gone. The monopole cuts us off. Okay? The monopole cuts us off. So instead of yes or no to life, monopole says, thread is cut. As in what that does in its simplest perspective, monopole, singularly attracting, but not all things are attracted equally. I have a projector body, so the monopole just stops attracting the life force to me. It will just stop. It will reduce it to such a minimum that slowly and surely the ability to tap into this life force disappears. And so when it comes to the relationship of death and type, it's a question between sacral versus non-sacral. That's the binary. So we see that about almost 70% of humanity, death turns off the motor. For the other approximately 30% or a little more, we're not being able to, we're limited. We cannot no longer tap into the life force. It just disappears. And so the experience, as far as the real difference between the two, is it's different in the way that the monopole is going to affect or impact us psychologically, as in your psychology, because the monopole is in charge there. Whether or not there's going to be life or death, it controls where the place in space that your death is going to be. Controls the mechanisms that bring about death. This is the direction towards death. So I had a little flash of awareness. My husband was telling me about an experience where people were forced to be in a bright light environment, even at dark, at nighttime. And my whole body just had an incredibly visceral adverse reaction to that. My eyes oftentimes close when I'm teaching, so long as I don't have the camera on. Well, actually, lately, last few years, I've been starting to teach with my eyes closed. Don't care how silly it looks. Okay. But the light, the sensitivity to light, I can imagine when the monopole shuts down this ability to tap in for the body, to tap into the life force, I'd find someplace nice and quiet and safe and dark to die. I wouldn't go out into the bright light, So your body, ideally, you're cared for, you're comforted, you're consoled or whatever. You have somebody with you. Isn't that one of the fears? Besides public speaking, I don't want to die alone. You hear this if you start doing a lot of analysis when people come to you and they reveal their fears to you, when they're alone at the end of their life and they can feel like, it's, I'm not getting any younger, but even older still, they don't want to die alone. It's one of the biggest fears, isn't it? To the not self mind. But what is it that our animals do when it's time to die? Do you see them? Don't they go off into their own like private little space to find that direction towards death? The monopole gives us our place. It gives us our place in life. It gives us our place in death. So here we're dealing with the gate 2 and our theme of genetic continuity. Remember, second line, genius. What a genius. Second line is barriers. Remember, barrier masters, I would call them? Picky. This moon going through gate 2, line 2, coordinates for the door. I wish we had an app that could give us the alarms for the 2 I mean, the two, not just the two, the moon. Wouldn't that be fun? Ah, it would be nice. So here we have the second line, and then we're looking at very, very specific barriers that are set up to coordinate the door. Ra loved that because it's deeply coordinated, as in the timing for you leaving this plane is very specific, and it is a place. You're going out in a very specific way, and all the coordinates are being established. You know all this stuff is part of it, that magnetic monopole alignment. So when we look at the magnetic monopole and the design crystal, when they align to each other, or in order for them to align to each other, the magnetic monopole has to turn. It turns, literally, physically, in order to turn to be able to meet the design crystal. Remember, fitting together like hand in glove? We're talking about things that are incredibly small. If you could see a design crystal, basically what you would see is that the design crystal has a place where it will merge or meld with a monopole. In other words, they come together in the mysticism of human design. This is the only true definition of love. Love. Remember love? You, thou art love. And it's an interesting thing to say. Love is a place, love is space, love is direction. Love, this unconditional love. This is what it's really all about. So Ra would often anthropomorphize, big word, the design crystal and the magnetic monopole. Basically, anthropomorphize means to give, some kind of human-like quality. So as an example, it's like they're thrown into incarnation. When they're separated from each other just 2 degrees after the conception, and they're forced into these different realms, when in actuality, they truly belong together. They belong to each other. And they have to go through what Ra calls this miserable thing of supporting this form for this idiotic personality crystal that's always trying to interfere. And finally, they get to die. When the personality crystal is trying to run the vehicle, they're actually separate. But then when they come together, you get to die. They too come together again, finally, and leave the body, and you get to die. Think of it as an opportunity. Isn't that quite something different to see? I get to die. Oh my God, it's my dying day. What a different perspective, hey? To be able to look forward to your bardo. It would be nice if we could figure out how to put out together some kind of legal template. I wonder if anybody in human design has already put something like that together. I'm sure in our own countries, we'd have to go ahead and run it by some lawyer for legalities, but it would be nice to have that as part of our process of preparing for death. Yeah, that's what I imagine would be nice as part of this experience. So something that's really fascinating to grasp is that every single human being on this planet, once a month, check it out, once a month, their monopole turns. Isn't that fascinating? Once a month, when the moon goes through the second line of the second gate, every single human being's monopole turns. So the moon is going to be in that line for 12 hours approximately, and all the monopoles are turned. How fascinating the way that the monopole turns when the moon is in gate 2, line 2. Genius. It is kind of genius the way that the magic of incarnation works, isn't it? So each and every one of us, because this might lead you to understand what accidental deaths are about, or violent deaths, we could call it. Every single month, each and every one of us, no matter whether you're going to die or not, every month when the moon enters the second gate, a coordinate is set up for our death. Isn't that very interesting? We read what the line quality talks about. The bold blue, the umbrella line, the lifetime of learning. we see unconscious and unlearnable alignment of stimulus and response, the natural. Or I'll call it a gorgeous line. Well, I think the moon is gorgeous anyway, but the moon here, ooh, that is quite nice. So when the monopole provides the stimulus in this context, it's when it's aligned, this opening up of the direction out, because it turns off the response mechanism. In other words, it begins to shut it down. It's interesting. My mind flashed to like Halloween and how we have this annual celebratory experience about Death's Day, currently. Why not have a day a month to honor the death process as a reminder? Here, Ra wants us to look at the lines. And we have Saturn exalted, Mars detriment. The ancients used to not, I don't know the exact timing. I have heard that the maybe Romans or Greeks thought that Saturn was awesome, super awesome. But mostly in Vedic astrology, they see Saturn in the ancient Vedic astrology. They saw Saturn as a death bringer. Yeah, part of the doom and gloom of being alive. Oh, we have pain in the body. Yeah, discipline, restriction, constraint, restraint, holding our breath. We know those things to be true as far as how we analyze or interpret for ourselves and others what Saturn can do in some places and spaces. But here we see exalted, Saturn being exalted. Mars detriment. You see Mars detrimenting quite a lot. It has some finer qualities, absolutely, like virility and energy. So what we're looking at with the Mars, first let's see genius as madness. So this is now the third one in a row. We see Mars in detriment in the death process. Third in a row where Mars is in detriment. That says a lot about what the dark side of, let's say, death brings out in people. The dark side of life, death. It reveals what has been life's immaturity, what in life you didn't take into consideration. Maybe you didn't really deal with it, or you got really angry about it. It gives you this enormous uncontrolled anger, in a sense. Not in a general sense, Ross says, because of any of the terminologies of type could be used. So if you're a generator, you could use frustration, not just anger. Okay. Here, in stage 3, they get angry, potentially. Especially, hi, Lavina, right here. I've got a Mars over here in 14, unconscious Mars. So Lavina's going to get angry when that moon goes through gate 2, line 2. That can be a signpost, but also bitter, right? Because remember, when in doubt, zoom out, look at the frequency of the being itself. The being itself brings a specific frequency. So many people get all caught up inside of little specificities when we have to remember that the being itself is a holistic construct. So anger for the manifester, frustration for the generator, bitterness, potentially resentment for a projector, and disappointment for the reflector. Okay, so you can remember that here. Remember that here. Stage 3, gate 2, line 2, Mars detriments. Okay, Mars detriments. So that means if that human being has the 2 or the 14 with Mars sitting there, that's their experience, right? Accordingly with their type, not just anger. Okay, potentially. Now let's look on the brighter side of things. The inner strength to focus and realize, knowing that life is coming to an end. In terms of the cognition system, knowing. Remember that individuality is about knowing. Yeah, part of the knowing circuitry, the sub-circuitry of individuality. Can you imagine being empowered by knowing life is coming to an end, by having the inner strength to focus and realize. Do you have Saturn in the 2 or the 14? Lucky you. Mind always wants to measure and compare, doesn't it? Oh, that's nice. I'd like that. Oh, I don't want that. That sucks. But it simply is. So when we look at the context of reaching this point and suddenly the trajectory, the direction is changing because the monopole turned. And then we have this concretized experience of how the being is moving around in their life, knowing that life is coming to an end in terms of the cognition system. Once a month, you get that gift. There are those who will have this inner strength to focus and realize. Maybe potentially Saturn's hanging out there in that gate activation, that construct, and then everybody will get that benefit potentially, even if they don't have Saturn there, sitting there, you see. So, in other words, you're just going to simply see what's happening. You may know it, be empowered by it. Maybe you grasp it or you're aware of it. You may not know it deep down inside, but maybe it's just a slight taste of it. Because remember, we're talking about gate 2, line 2. So, line 2, unaware of what is there. Remember, line 2, the natural. But how you're going to operate in terms of your cognition, you may have, like cognition, we're talking about your cognitive awareness, yeah? Taste or whatever, the thing that makes you different accordingly, your body, your mind, your tonal difference. So here you have a way of incorporating that life is coming to an end. This natural gift for unlearnable knowing is a gift of acceptance, not necessarily acceptance psychologically, because the mind, it'll rail at its fate. The personality has a really tough time with the fact that it's been left out of the loop and it has no choice. The ride is over. It's going to lose its ride. Party's over. Time to let go. The vehicle, the body, is the one that focuses and realizes. So that inner strength of realizing, and this is Saturnian, remember, discipline, it goes both ways. Quite like that about Saturn. I love Saturn. Thank you, Saturn, to give us the discipline, the strength, the inner strength here. There's a relationship between Saturn and Kronos, the ancient Greek, I believe, mythology, god of time. There are many relationships of Saturn to, sometimes he's related to the Grim Reaper, the bringer of death. Cosmically, people, modern day and recently ancient, thought of it as death. Well, time passes in these bodies. We are embodied, and the body is linked to time. It's how we experience time through the body. So what you think about as far as the Saturnian cycle, 30s, remember, when you're 30, that was the end of childhood in this 9-centered vehicle. The 7-centered vehicle, hey, it was death time. Now, not always, because it's a dangerous word to be so extreme in black and white. There are exceptions. Some people mature later than others. 6 lines, they take a while, right? So we could say often Saturn brings some kind of pain, constriction, restriction, restraint. Yeah. On the body side, it talks about calcification of the bones. So psychologically, it's been referred to as the cutting of the umbilical cord or a disconnecting from the parent, the death of a child or the birth of the adult. All of these things time brings. So Saturn, again, this inner strength to focus and realize, a natural gift for unlearnable knowing. Saturn brings discipline, restraint, constraint. These can be words that are used for quote unquote good or used in the positive sense. So don't get too caught up in the negative, because look, here's one of those exalted experiences of Saturn. Having Saturn exalted in this line is perfect, according to Ra here. However, Saturn carries a terminator quality. The end is near, and there's nothing that you're going to be able to do about it, nothing that you as a personality can do about it. Now, Of course, modern day era, we have all of kinds of fancy designer drugs and technologies. You may be able to prolong your life or your process of death because we're all dying, but you will not be able to avoid it. According to Ra, nobody will. You know, if we think about his prophecy of the planet being hit by an asteroid in whatever 1300 years, yeah, nobody will be able to avoid dying, even if they happen to have a breakthrough in life extension, which I know that there are some incredible things out there in the works. So it's something to grasp about Saturn or Saturnian truths. Death is just a doorway, but it's something that we all must deal with. And death is not the end. It's just in the spiral of life, all ends are beginnings, and it's about the next, whatever incarnation it happens to be for you and me. Ross says, because of the amount of people that are here on the planet currently, and the fact that there's going to be a sharp contraction in humanity, that most people that you see walking around in this planet and this reality are actually not coming back as human on this planet. So it's your last opportunity. What are you going to do with it? As if you had a choice. But he says, I guess the thing I hope is expressed most in understanding the second gate and the theme is the door. It is not an end. It is the completion of something, no question. The completion of the process of that particular cycle in this particular form, whatever it happens to be for you, your body, in this personality ride of this life. So you can see the continuity to the previous lines. On one side, you're always going to have this exaltation. Yeah, it's two sides of the same coin. Same coin. Really easy for people to see or witness the experience through the death of parents or whatever loved ones you might have seen pass. If you've ever watched anybody actually die, you see this calmness up close, calmness, quietness, or acceptance. The things that make naturally, again, the things that make it look very peaceful according to the natural process of disincarnating or decarnating, I should say. But then on the other side, there's that violent Martian side. Genius is madness. I'm not going to die. It can't kill me. I'll find a way. Madness. Mars. Knowledge exclusively as power for the enhancement of the ego. In other words, the delusion that knowledge is power. Isn't that funny that a lot of people say that? Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. I'd be curious to see if Moon in Gate 2, and they have Mars there as well. Maybe bring that up in them once a month. Now, Ra says that nothing is really as opposite to Saturn as Mars. Forget this Venus stuff, Mars and Venus. Women are from Venus and men are from Mars, that kind of thing. No. It's Saturn and Mars being completely different, as in recklessness, fecklessness, immaturity, blind enthusiasm. That's Mars. It can be very Martian compared to the discipline, the solidarity, the slow plodding of time marching on that Saturn brings or may bring. So I'm not going to die. I'll find a way. Yeah, the energy, the delusion, that knowledge is power. Both sides of this line, Gate 2, Line 2, recognize that something's happening. Okay? Your higher self, feeling that. Where do you feel your G? For me, right under the sternum. So you'll notice that when Gate 2, Line 2 is lit up by the moon, what we have here, both sides of the line, is that there's no question that something has gone wrong if wrong according to what the personality thinks of as wrong, because it doesn't want to die. Body, design, and magnetic monopole, they're celebrating. Hallelujah, we're back again, together again, But the mind recognizing that something is happening that it may have an adverse react to. On one side, you could be resigned. And we know that those of us who are resigned. Resignation is the gate 30, line 3. I might feel resigned to that fate, you know. On the flip side, looking for solutions to stop the dying process. Like, how can I stop this? How much money can I pay in order to get on that machine or that drug or whatever it happens to be? So it's always going to depend on your design. Is it that you have inside of that channel? What activations do you have in the 2 or the 14? Because that's going to play a part in how you're going to experience this. All of us deal with both to varying degrees. So it's going to be scaled or analyzed differently. Some of us, have you ever looked around at your body graph to see how many exaltations or detriments you might have in certain planets and actually calculate like which planet really affects you? You know, not just the fixings that you have, but which planets really affect you. That's 2 different calculations you might do. You know, I am not a spreadsheet person, but gosh darn it, wouldn't it be nice if they added that to the software? Which planets am I predominantly attuned to? You know, that would be nice. Some of us are going to be resigned, whether we resonate it from the line quality. Hi, that's me, you know, my son. At the same time, well, maybe if we go over here, that might help. You know, maybe if we ask that person or do that thing, do we have enough money to pay for that? You know, what is it when they test a drug? Experimental, not approved yet. So, regardless of which way you turn, your mind turns, because the monopole has turned, death comes for us all. The change in orientation of that magnetic monopole, that turning, the magical theme of the line of direction. Remember, it's the root of Neptune's trident, right? The Sphinx, the Sphinx, the tail of the Sphinx, if we were to look down at it. So if you think about this, instead of the way that Ra has described it to us in terms of death, let's think about in terms of the life and see how it's expressed, how clearly that here, expressed in the essence of what is correct or what is not in life, is absolutely something that we can see. The inner strength to focus and realize that that direction is written for all of us. It's just written, except that there is death or there is no surrender. Not deterministically. That's not what this is about. As in, our as a personality feeling, thinking the illusion of choice. We live in this Maya, right? It brings the illusion of choice. Yet, do we really have that choice of when to die? Can I just pick a spot and go, here, I want to die right here? It's going to be like with all my friends around me. We're going to have a party. And yep, I'm going to have a party. I'm going to have a death party. You're all invited. And at the end, I'm going to die. Okay. Because this is the way that I want to go out with a bang. I guess you could if you injected yourself with one of those, what did, what's his name do? John Martin, you know? I think it was actually a liquid that he swallowed. This form begins and it too shall end. All things live and then die. All we can do is be aware, focus and realize that we are beyond compare and just see, witness. The other side, again, genius as madness, knowledge exclusively as power. So what might it also show up like? Quote, I know the way, I make up the way, I decide the way, I can do anything, I can defeat this, I can defeat that, I run my life, I make the decisions, I. Makes me think of George Bush when he said, I'm the decider. I often link that to the mind. Genius is madness. So we can all go to our ends uniquely, at least according to Ra. That's the way it's intended to be. You can see that in the concretization that you are no more deeply aware of your aloneness. all oneness than when you are facing death. There's nothing in that but aloneness. We don't die together as in have our bardo together. It's a very personal process from within the construct of the brain system with its electrical firing according to the wiring that we have access to as a personality after the vehicle and the magnetic monopole have left the body. That's when the bardo begins. So as observers, we are passengers witnessing. Let's say, if you're dealing with aging, have you ever seen somebody really start to lose their faculties? They go blind, they go deaf, they lose their taste, life shuts down. So if you're dealing with those where you get to have visual contact with them, Ra says it's good to pay them a visit around the time of the moon, after the moon has entered into the second gate. That's the greatest time to set up a regular kind of visit. Because between the moon in the 2 and the moon in the 29, that's half a day per hexagram that you've got there. So sometime between this window, 8, 9, or 10 days, whatever that case may be, it's a very good time to go visit those beings who are in hospice or on their deathbed, whatever it happens to be in the hospital, because you can potentially notice the shift in them, the shift in direction, the shift in their attention, their activity level, their concentration, all the things that are part and parcel of how the moon is going to go through the 2. And Ra wants us to know that there's something else for all of us to think about, for all of us to pay attention to. So the 2 is a coordinate being drawn towards the potential for correctness in life, or the continuation of the not self. So as we go through this program, because it's very important for you to recognize it, feel it, because when you feel it and you're aware of it, you won't forget what that maybe feeling is like. So to recognize that when the moon comes into the second gate, in some ways, it's going to give you this opportunity for potentially between 2 and 29, a recommitment to your decision-making process of honoring yourself as your own authority. Yeah, experimenting with your strategy. Because the not self leads to psychological deterioration. Example, you've got a very sensitive brain-body system, rigid dietarily, we'll say. Okay, you're supposed to eat one thing at a time consecutively. And you're not doing that. You're eating mixed foods. You're having this difficulty digesting. Your brain's kind of out of line, out of whack. But whatever, you've got some kind of, let's call it, as an example, something going on, candida, an overgrowth of candida, and you really love birthday cake. Just making up a silly example, okay? And so you're eating the birthday cake, and it's degrading your cognitive faculty. And then you don't get to see clearly. And then your mind isn't operating correctly. Somebody pisses you off, you're an emotional generator, and you fly off the handle. Oops. The degradation of the psychology because the body was not operating or being fed, nourished correctly. You see? So, if we get to this place of physiological deterioration because of incorrect operation, that's really a bummer. Psychologically, we rely on, we depend on, we are helpless to, choiceless to what we have been given as a gift, this body. And however it is that it's designed to uniquely cognate difference, I'm feeling. I feel things differently, deeply. What is it like for you? If you have access to your tonal cognition on the body side, this brings an intelligence of the form that leads you to being drawn to the right places, that eventually lets you see things clearly in order to be motivated to action correctly, to be aware. what is there. So that's really what it is, just being aware. So this place, the two, remember, direction, renew your own commitment to the joy of life experience, the beauty and the wonderment of what it is to be embodied in this one precious vehicle that has its one and only life. We who are 15 billion years old in this virginal body in the beginning, of course, this beauty and joy of life when it is correct. Because of all of that potential, imagine what that's like to be committed to your life. Ra says, we have to finally come to grips with what it is to be a passenger, to surrender that it is the vehicle's right to live and to die on its own terms, and that the passenger is here to witness this life, liberated from choice until it's liberated from the form, as in allowed to go through the door into the timeless magic of its bardo, because bardo is absolutely timeless. It can be a beautiful thing. And I hope that you too get to see what it will bring.